I started outperforming probably 200% every month, like quite consistently. When an employee feels their contribution, their larger contribution, no matter how small or large it might be, to your vision, that's when they come to work with a purpose, and that's when they drive every day. If you have a sales team that can articulate what you're doing better than you are and why you're doing it better than you are, that's the perfect sales team for you.
So I've just realised that you were born in Russia, which is amazing. That you wanted to become a lawyer. You didn't like that, and then I think you pivoted, right? So was it Go One after that pivot from university, from wanting to become a lawyer? And what I really want to know and do a little bit of a deep dive on is, why did you make that decision?
That's a really good question. It was, so I've never actually been in a law firm. I did all of my placements for my law degree. I finished my law degree. I'm waiting for my dad to be admitted with me, so we'll actually still get admitted together. But I did all of my placements at the businesses I worked for because they'd rather me work in conjunction with their in-house legal team as opposed to take 4 weeks off from sales. So that worked really well in my favour. And in Telstra, there was a pivotal moment for me where I applied for a few legal jobs at the end of my degree, but before I had to do my practical legal training. I thought, all right, I will apply for some. We'll see how we go. And when I say some, I mean like 2. It wasn't that many. Yeah. And then I got one interview, but then they called me and said, sorry, we filled it before we even had an interview. And I figured that was my sign. And Go One, one of my old managers, she kept calling me. She used to work with me at Telstra, and she moved to Go One, and she just kept calling and said, hey, there's an SDR role available. And she was calling for about a year, and I said, you know what, I'll go do that instead, and we'll see how we go. And at that moment I decided law wasn't for me, but I still love the content. I loved what I've learned. I apply it every day. You need it in contracts, the critical thinking and understanding of how to get different information and use it for the argument or the outcome that you're doing. So I think at that moment I decided it's not meant to be. Okay,
yeah. Let's hover on that just a little bit. Yeah. Just to backtrack though, is your father a lawyer as well?
So my dad is a very interesting human. He's a surgeon, has a PhD in medicine. He's a very smart individual, and he's undergone some turmoil with the media and with the Queensland government at the moment. And
I remember that. I remember you saying that. Yeah.
But so he decided that he wanted to study law, and so we did it together. And
wow,
so
that's interesting. Super interesting. Yeah, right.
He inspires me daily, that man.
Yeah.
It's 20 degrees, I think.
Yeah. So you guys are obviously tight, right? Really close.
We're very close, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, so you learnt a lot doing that law degree. Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's so many verticals inside that, especially with contracts and the compilation of documentation to do business with, right, later in life. It's pretty good. So
also saves on legal fees, right? Because you can read everything, all of the clauses, and then say, hey, this is what I want amended. Can you please comment on this? So before the lawyer actually even goes through a contract for you, like say your lease, you've already read the whole thing and made notes, so it saves you thousands of dollars. I think.
100%.
It's great.
We use ChatGPT Legal AI to help us with the preliminary documents before we move it over to a technical lawyer. But
start doing that.
Yeah, so you know when you go to move from one thing to another, I always find this interesting with people because I sort of get to a determination. We go, oh, that's an entrepreneurial move, right? That's not a career move. That's a different type of move. So when you were doing the law thing, and then you got your hands on sales, right? Did you look at sales and go, hey, I could really do something here and earn really good money? I can get into training. I can do all these other things. Or did you just go, you know what? I just don't like law. I'm just going to try something different. So you sort of ran like Bambi walking through the forest blindly, right? Did you do that, or was it considered?
I think it was quite considered because when I was 18, so as soon as I could legally get a job for a bigger corporation in sales or...
So you're young at this time.
Yeah, I was 18 when I got my first job at Telstra Business. I turned 18 in June, and then I got the job in September. Yeah. And at that moment, I was already working for my dad, but then we just wanted to separate family and business there for a moment. And I started performing very well, and there was organic. I think there was an organic piece there. Obviously, a little bit of coaching. Jacob, he played a big part in my development, but I started outperforming probably 200% every month, like quite consistently, and people started like spending more time actually researching or listening to my calls, seeing what I was doing wrong or unethically.
200%, that's a big number. It's a big metric.
It was a big metric.
Why is that? Like, how do you go in and do that without really any experience?
I think I did listen to a couple of podcasts, and there are two types of salespeople, or three types, right? But there's the everyone else, then there's the really good salespeople who follow up a bit, and then there's the top % who just have it in them to, I think, I don't really know how to explain it. You just have that instinct of when to call, when to follow up, and how to actually converse with someone, because so many people look at sales as a transactional metric of, hey, I'm calling you to do business and that's it. Whereas what I would always do differently is I don't care who I'm calling. I've actually made quite a few friends from cold calling. Is you are a person just as much as I am, and I will call you and have a conversation. I understand I'm interrupting your day, and I do believe that I will be able to assist you in some way, shape or form, whether it's now, whether it's in 3 months, whether it's in 3 years, it doesn't really matter. And so as long as you constantly bear in mind the future and just developing a relationship, you don't know where it will lead, and that's how I approach every single conversation, and usually it resolves in a pretty quick outcome.
You have a, that application is very segmented, right? So that means, that tells me that you're quite analytical. You look at things in a very analytical manner. Sales is hard, though, to be analytical and convert deals, though, right? So inside that, look, I get that you're like that. I can tell. Like, you go, I need to do this sequentially to get that, right? Like, I know that you think like that. But sales can be difficult because I find most salespeople are pretty emotional. Yeah. Sort of all over the place, right?
It's an emotional roller coaster. Really, every month you go back
Isn't
to
it?
zero.
Isn't
It's crazy.
So you're in Telstra. You learn it really quickly. You convert at a high rate, and I'm still trying to figure out how you do that. I get the analytical part.
I think it's about
Was it coaching? Was it good quality coaching, or did you just figure it out?
I think it was a combination of both. There was a level of guidance and coaching. I've never had one-on-one coaching for sales or anything like that. And if it was the coaching, I think everybody in the cohort would have exceeded. So I think there was a level of, I always was inquisitive. I always did research. But more importantly, I tried different things and understanding tonality, how to ask questions, and also what questions to ask. And then it comes down to that basic sales structure that you work out in your head, where to me, sales is like an essay. And I think that's where my law degree and everything else kind of came into it, was the conclusion that you're trying to make. The person doesn't know it. You introduce it in the introduction by asking them a series of research questions, if you will, like you would if you're writing an essay. Then you do the body paragraphs, and you're doing this on the phone within 2 to 5 minutes. And then at the end, you conclude it with your pitch, and that's how you're getting the person to ask these questions, come to these conclusions, and pretty much sell themselves before you even ask for the money, because it just makes sense to them. And that's just the logical conversation I've always had, because the way that I look at it, I don't like when someone tells me that I need to buy something unless I've genuinely asked, hey, this is what my issue is, can you please advise me? If someone says, hi, I've never spoken to you before, you need this on the phone, that I'm going to say, send me an email. But if you just have a conversation with them, you will find the fit naturally, and that's just, I think, always been in my mind.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think being analytical in terms of psychometrics and how a conversation plays out, because I think everyone's trying to have a conversation in a very short period of time and cover everything, which I think is very difficult, because sales is a very difficult space, and I really want to talk about sales today because I think there's a lot of learning there. So talk to me the difference between selling. People struggle with this, man, all the time. It's like, it fucking does people's head in. Like, what's the difference between selling and closing? Because I sat with the sales team this morning, and there's a guy in the team who's really good at communicating to customers, but is a very low performer in terms of sales, right? So I have a perception of that. What's your perception of that?
I think for me, it would be understanding when you've gathered enough information by asking questions, and understanding that shift in, okay, we're done talking, what do you actually want? And understanding that point in the conversation where you have to now reposition and pivot
Yeah.
and actually,
Yeah.
in a way, ask for the sale. So it doesn't have to be, okay, you're ready to put down your credit card now, but in whatever you're selling, you'll
Yeah.
have a different series of closing questions. But
Yeah.
that's, for me, the difference between selling and closing is when you're confident that you have the information to pre-handle any objection, to know where they stand, to know their financial position, to know how this will benefit them, to and know that, be confident that they understand it as well, because they have regurgitated that information to you, that you can then switch and ask the question and close the deal without having to beg for it. I actually was speaking to this about this yesterday, but otherwise you're just in this never-ending cycle, waiting for them to ask, or going, oh, are you ready to buy now? Like, you shouldn't ever feel like
Okay,
that.
let's technically hover on that. So you're talking about, why do they inquire, like a bit of discovery, right? Making a determination at what stage of the funnel they're in. Like, are they at the top? Are they just doing research, or are they ready to make a decision? I'm assuming.
It depends on the lead, of
Yeah.
course. So if it's inbound, you probably would have a slightly different sequence of events that you take them through. But if it's an inbound lead, they're obviously interested, they're ready to buy, and it's more likely that they'll have an understanding of the company. You'll ask them a series of questions depending on what it is that you're selling, and then you will ask for a buy-in at the end based on that information. Now, again, I reiterate, when you ask for buy-in, I don't ever say, are you ready to buy now? That's not what I mean, but it's you switch to closing and finalizing the sale and assumptive closing every 20 billion times. Alternatively, if you have an outbound cold call and they've never heard of you before, depending on the ticket price of the item, if it's $50, $100, like, might be something that you close on that call, 100%. If it's something a little bit higher, I feel that you'd need to start understanding that emotional state of the customer and getting them to actually pigeon out or give you time within their calendar to be committed to actually speaking to you, where they don't feel like you're trying to sell them something on the spot, whether that's 15 minutes, half an hour. But it's also quite important, I feel like, in cold calling, when they've never heard of you before, and it's not a warm lead, that you are interrupting their day, and so many people forget that.
Yeah, I know, right? You've got to be quite delicate at that entry point, right?
So if someone calls me right now, I answer the phone.
Yeah.
You're not going to... I got to go, man.
Yeah. Like, dude, what are you calling me for? I'm like hanging off a roof right now. But yeah, I get that. So what you're saying is, depending on the acquisition of the lead, the strategy's different.
100%.
Yeah. So what are those lead acquisitions? So we're talking cold calling, right? We're talking meta, maybe social media, where they have not been nurtured. It's really, they've just clicked on an ad and submitted their form, and it's sort of like a warm call maybe.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about, they've gone through some nurturing. So they've got information, they've read some things, gone to the website, so they're further down the funnel.
There's
So
probably 4 types. So there's the outbound cold call, never heard of you.
Yeah.
The lead form inquiry, I just categorize them all as warm leads, the ones that have never engaged with your company in terms of speaking, but they've engaged online, whether it's through a lead submission form, Google form, Meta form, at an event, whatever it might be. All of those are they're still in the same category of they don't really know, but they're interested, so they're a different category. Then I also think that past leads, they're not necessarily, I wouldn't classify them as warm leads, but the ones...
you mean old leads?
Yeah, repulling opportunities that haven't been closed is a really overlooked area, because you've nurtured them, you've had a conversation with them, and if you've done the correct discovery and the correct notes from your sales team before, it's actually a really easy conversation to restart, because you don't have to redo the whole discovery, and you just rebuild that trust by going, hey Bob, I was having a quick look there, you weren't quite ready, you were having your company there, we just wanted to call and see how you're going with this and that. And it's already breaks down that barrier of, I'm not immediately trying to sell you something, but it's I'm just curious, I want to find out, how is your business? Okay, in this space you're obviously selling education, it's like, how are you educating yourself? What have you done in the past 9 months? Where do you feel like you might be lacking some skills now that you've grown? And then from there, it's like, okay, well, it seems like now might be the right time to do that. What was the hindering factor 6 months ago as opposed to now? And then you kind of go into the close there based on that conversation. So it's a different kind of lead again. And then the ones that weren't a fit are a little bit different again. So you would have had the cold call leads or the warm leads that you called a year ago, and they weren't a fit back then, but maybe they've grown. But they're different because they had no interest. So those would be the way that I'd categorize them.
So you built a few sales teams. Like I know we've spoken about that previously, which is a challenging operation, right? So for those watching, and I think we're trying to do a course around this, right? It's very difficult to build a sales team, to track KPIs, to know how to manage a team, using metrics, analytics, and then using also emotion and coaching and all that sort of stuff. Right? It's a very fine balance. So just to hover on that a little bit. So you're saying if you're going to build a sales team, identify the entry points of lead acquisition, be very clear about it, and then coach the team on the entry point to that lead acquisition, and then monitor and then tweak accordingly, right?
I'd put the entry point or coaching on the lead acquisition a little bit later down the track. I think the first thing that any sales team needs to know is the why of the company, why they're doing it, and to believe in the product that they're selling. I was listening.
That's super interesting you say that.
Well, Alex Hormozy, I was listening to one of his podcasts the other day. And
Never heard of him.
Never heard of him.
I'm just joking.
Who's that? Has nothing to do with sales, like nothing at all.
Man, I see him more than anyone else in my life pop up on my feed. It's crazy.
It's fantastic, honestly. His content always is just on point. I actually almost moved to Las Vegas to try to. I was ready to go. But anyway, we won't get into that. In terms
is that because they're recruiting?
Oh, they were hiring, and this was about 4 months ago now, and I was ready to just.
Really?
I was well. That's probably.
Where are they, in Boston? Are they in
Las
Boston?
Vegas, Nevada.
Oh, Las Vegas.
Yeah, they have different tax laws there. Really interesting.
Yeah.
But anyway, Alex Hormozy podcast, and he was saying that you can acquire a really good salesperson, like that over exceeds in the first 2 months, like, because they're a natural talent, they know what they're doing, they have the experience, and they join the team, and you tell them about the product, they're invested, they're good, and they start performing, and then their performance drops after 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, 100%.
And the reason for that usually is that they don't want to sell the product, and I can say that.
What do you mean they don't want to sell the product? Like
when you don't believe that your product is, or the product that you're selling.
Belief.
When you don't believe that the product that you're selling is going to benefit the person you're selling it to, and there's nothing that you can change about
super interesting.
The implementation, the quality, the control of it, whether they actually need it as well. I've had this experience in the past, not at Go One, but in other places where if you're starting to feel that you can't deliver, and you're kind of selling bullshit in a way, it starts to feel wrong, because I feel that the best salespeople are very, very ethical in what they do, and that's why they succeed, is because they believe so wholeheartedly in the company, in the business, and the vision, and what they're selling.
So how do you get that across? Like, I mean, in the first instance, so I've just hired like 2 sales guys, right? So that's part of the induction process, right? To sit them down and to take them on a journey. Is that what you say?
Yes.
Do that straight away?
Always. Absolutely.
How do you do that? Is that like you just sit there and talk to them, or is this an LMS thing? Is this an ongoing journey where you check in with them and you start talking about the development of the company?
I think it's a little bit of everything, if I'm honest. So everyone has different learning styles, auditory, visual, a combination of both. Any time that I've ever onboarded a team, first thing you come in, vision, mission, values. Yes, that might be lame, but you need to understand, what is the company, what are we doing, who are we doing it for, and what's the outcome that we want them to achieve.
Yeah, right? I like that. That's cool.
Yeah, so even my e-commerce brand, I've got a few employees, but I have a vision, mission, PowerPoint for them.
So vision, mission, value, did you say?
Yeah, vision, mission, values. Yeah. And in that, you take them through where you want the company to be, who you want to serve, what's the result you want them to deliver, who's the customers, how do you want them to feel, what's the outcome, and what you achieved in the past 2 years, 1 year, however long you've been operating, and then where you want to go. Because when a person, when a staff member, when an employee feels their contribution, their larger contribution, no matter how small or large it might be, to your vision, that's when they come to work with a purpose, and that's when they drive every day. Because that's why business owners work so hard, because they know what they're doing, who they're doing it for, and that's what drives them every day. And if you can make the people that work for you or with you understand that and feel a part of it and see the impact every day, that's where you'll get consistent results, because they're pretty much, they're on the ride with you. They don't just feel like a cog. And that's where I felt the biggest success.
It's feeling partisanly, isn't it? You know, we've got to understand we're biological, emotional entities at the end of the day.
Yeah.
and they want to get up and believe that what they're doing has some level of contribution. So that's super interesting. Yep. It's not a one-time thing though, right? If I was to break that down, like you have to find a strategy to execute against that for the long term. How would you do that?
Well, a book that was pivotal for me, Measure What Matters. I talk about this a lot, but objectives and key results. And this was implemented by YouTube, MyFitnessPal, LSKD, some of the biggest brands in the world that have had success. And you have one overarching objective for the company, which is then broken down into key results. And that can be revenue, impact on society, impact on the customer. Internal culture is a really big one, I find, as well, to maintain a level of culture and the kind of philosophy that you want to have and kind of integrating your values into that. And then each of those key results become the objective of the leaders. And then the bigger your team grows, the more you get the key results become the objectives, vice versa, and then you can kind of pack it all back up like a Russian doll, if you will. And as you do that, you start to actually see what people are doing that's irrelevant, because it's very binary. It's like, did we achieve this key result? Yes or no? Like, there's no, kind of. No, it's like yes or no. You have to be very blunt with it. But you set such stretch goals and stretch targets, and you check in with them. You obviously do the annual report.
So you have to build some infrastructure around that execution, right?
Absolutely.
And it's got to be consistent.
It's all about consistency, and that's I think where a lot of businesses can struggle is like you have this awesome onboarding, you're like, yes, this is so fun, this is what we do, and then you get these sales teams that go in there, it's like, we're calling, but then I sell it and I don't really care because the CSMs, they don't look after it and they're overworked, and the marketing team's doing a different messaging, and then no one understands, and then the product's different, and then nothing's delivered, and then the customer's angry at me. It's like, what's the point? And so everything is so disjointed that then the person that's actually driving the revenue for your business feels so disheartened. They don't want to sell anymore because they don't feel that passion for what they're selling, because they can see it's not being delivered. So everything has to be cohesive, because the way that a business grows isn't just by acquisition of new revenue, it's by retention of past revenue as well. And that's where you start to double, triple, quadruple, 10x, is when you can retain the customers and the revenue and keep reselling to them. And that comes from a very strong infrastructure of delivery, support, and everything in between.
There's a lot in that, right?
There is.
Man, that is so big. But it's so interesting because you can apply that logic and that model to basically everything. And I think we were just talking before as we started recording, when I said, God, wow, what a year, right, it's been. And I said to you that the market has changed and that the consumer's changed. I think not only has the consumer changed, but the employees changed, because they want to be part of something. They don't, salespeople don't want to just come in, hit the target, make all the cash, and then onto the next deal. I think it's really, really important what you're saying. I thought, any business is... Here's something. I was in I've got an advisory board, right? And in that advisory board, there's six people. Had a meeting last week or the week before, can't remember. These guys are like turning over, 10, 50, some of them 150, 250 million, right? There's some whales in that group. And all of them have a problem with their sales team. It was just mind-blowing to me that when you're turning over 150 million, you still haven't got a handle on building your sales team.
Well, I feel that there's a bit of a stigma around sales teams in a way, where for some reason they're just always, we've got the company and then we've got the sales team, right? Yeah,
they separate it out, right? But, they push it in the back, in the basement.
Why though? And that's...
I don't know. It's an old school mentality, that's for sure.
One thing I will ask, it's a rhetorical question, or if you'd like to even answer it. So many businesses and leaders, and the bigger that they get, they start to lack the transparency within a company, and that's where you can get that disjointedness. And sometimes if a sales team is bringing a lot of revenue, then people know commission structures, and it's like, why are they earning so much? And there can be that stigma around that. But if there is a narrative that is brought from the top down around everybody's impact on the business, and I know that when I was building a team, I'd have very clear transparency of all metrics. Obviously, you have all staff have a confidentiality clause at all times, so it's not to be shared. But it's so important to celebrate the wins together, and that they don't read about it in the Australian Financial Review of, this company generated 100 million. They're like, what impact did I have on that?
Well, it's because some people can perceive that as being, these guys are just all about the money. right? That's what the team can think.
But if you show the team what you're investing in as a business, where we're growing, which business is having what impact, which business function has what impact, and how significant that is, it makes every team so motivated and they feel important because they are.
So are you talking about contribution, right? What's the contribution of the revenue? Where does it contribute to society and our mission?
Pretty much, it's if you say the sales team closed 300 million, like let's just say 300 million this year, fantastic. A week, a month, a day. And they say that we've closed X amount of revenue this year, which is a fantastic feat, but 20% of that was driven by inbound marketing. So thank you so much to the marketing team. And then we also had this much closed. And then that we retained X amount of customers, which was 600 million. So thank you so much to our customer service team and the retention team. And that was done because of the development that was put into it. So we wouldn't be able to do it without our dev team. And so now let's replicate that, let's grow, and let's continue working together and communicate. So tell me, what's the biggest feedback from customers that's not working? What can we fix in dev? What's the biggest marketing things that are working? What are people responding to? What are the biggest challenges on the phone? How can we change our marketing messaging? And then as opposed to it being the sales team going, oh, my marketing team's not adhering with me and the customers aren't happy, it turns into how are we working together to so that everyone is speaking the same message, the same language, and we're all growing together to be X, which is our mission of the company. And I think that's a massive difference.
I love that. I think that is how you should build a team. I don't think a lot of people do that, though. I'll be honest with you. I think they try to achieve that because that's really big. What you just said then, setting that narrative across different divisions, different people, and I always feel that like marketing, operations, sales, they all have their own little clicky culture, right? So you've got to get some congruency across that, which can be very difficult. So my question would be to that is, how do you execute against that? Like, is that, and whose job is it? That can't be the sales manager's job.
I think honestly, it's the leader of the company, the CEO, the director, the owner.
I knew you were going to say
but it's their role not to execute it, but to encourage the narrative. And one thing
communicate it.
That was always kind of almost an issue for me was people thought, or not people, but there was an incident where people mistook that transparency for control. And that's a very key difference. It has to be led by the leader of the business. Understanding what teams are doing so that all teams are cohesive and everyone's communicating the same message should not ever be mistaken or taken as an ego piece, where some people have an ego about sharing what they're doing. It's not an ego. It's not a piece of ego. If you know what everyone is doing at all times, you are able to move together in sync and move forward. But if you're going, I can't do that because it's not my job to tell you, I don't need to tell you that. Well, aren't we all part of the same company growing the same thing? Why are we hiding it from each other? There's absolutely no point in that. So it's that it has to be communicated from the top down, from the owner. That's what you want in your business. We want transparency, we want growth, and we want collaboration. And collaboration comes from communication and transparency and trust in each other, that we all have the best intent of the company, we all have the values that align with the company, and that we all want to go forward. And also never reprimanding difference in opinion, but actually encouraging conversation and encouraging people to speak up and say, I disagree with that, or what about this? Have you thought about it this way? Because if you don't have those conversations, that's where bigger ideas don't come into play. That was a very long-winded answer, but I hope that...
No, it's a good answer though, because again, there's a lot on that. But so you're saying building a culture around that allows people to open up and to speak freely and transparently, right, without any type of reprimand. And then
within reason, obviously, but like not but you get what I mean. It's if you want to ask a question, like just take it at face value as a question of just trying to understand why a business is doing something, because that's where it comes into play. Because a lot of the time, like you can make decisions of where to send a lead, right? Like let's just take something that simple, but and it can be sent to one inbox as opposed to another. But you have to consider, you need to track. What's the conversion rate? How much did it cost you? What are we getting out of it? What's the quality of it? What data did we collect? Is it beneficial to invest more money into this campaign in order to generate more sales, right? And if you send it to a private inbox, for example, you're not going to get that data and you might be missing leads, right? but that's just something you have to be transparent about why you're doing it. If it's questions like, oh, why would we send it there instead of there, and instead of saying, oh, because that's what I decided, it's, well, because we want to take into consideration this so that we can continue growing the team, so we can support you, so that we can give you the development, so that we can see which elements of it aren't working, so that we can continue to grow towards our mission.
There's a lot of analytics, analysis tracking, metric tracking inside that, right? So you've got to get that right. I think some people manage a sales team based on emotion without any metrics. It's like they have the sales on a board or something, and they ring a bell and do all that bullshit, which is fine, do that, but how can you track it long term without precise metrics, from conversion, from lead to appointment to how many calls?
Well, your KPI should be directly correlating to the outcome that you want, right? So if your metric is, if you're paying someone or giving them a kicker based on 60 calls a day, right? They're going to make 60 calls a day, but are they burning the leads? Are they actually calling them? Are they speaking?
That's definitely the wrong metric.
Yeah, so you have to find a metric that correlates directly to the outcome that you want for your team, but also for your customer. So what's that metric? Well, it depends on the team, right? Yeah. But say that they're calling 60 times a day and they're getting an answer rate of 20%, right? And then you're closing, again, 50% of that. Yeah. Or as opposed to they're calling 60, they're getting 30% and they're closing 20% of that. The issue then becomes, I don't want you to call more because your close rate is bad. So let's slow down the calls and let's find out what are you saying on the phone. So you don't want to increase the call volume if the call itself is broken, because you can't really call those customers back for another month or two and when they've recycled. So you need to look at the metrics slowly and implement them based on the outcomes that you want. And
I'm going to hold you to a couple of metrics here.
Okay.
So when I hear people talk about sales, they talk about all these metrics, right? Like, and I get all the metrics. Like, we track so many metrics, it does my head in. It's like metric city. I want a t-shirt, less metrics, please. So
you don't need to have that many. You just need to understand the ones that you need.
So give me 3 key metrics that you think drive the success of a sales team.
Depends on if it's B2B or B2C.
So let's say it's B2C.
B2C.
So we're talking inbound leads, Meta, Google.
Yep.
Into a CRM, calling. They've got forms, web forms, a whole bunch of different stuff, right?
Well, the first metric you look at is conversion rate. Second one that I'd look at...
So explain conversion rate, though, because there's some people who don't understand truly where... Because you can mark a conversion rate from different places.
So if it's a cold call, my conversion rate is blatantly, they call, they convert the sale is done, that is it. Yeah. You can add a secondary metric on that.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
This is super interesting to me. And I think people need help technically about how to do this.
Yeah.
So how long is it forever, right? It's like the lead comes in January and they close them in June. Or they close them 30 days later. So when you talk to conversion rates to sales agents, is that just open? Or do you track it in a certain time frame?
Well, you'll go month by month.
Yeah. And
just because the lead doesn't get converted doesn't mean that lead can't be recontacted and closed at a later time. So that's irrelevant. But say in the 30-day time frame, you get 100 leads that come in, right? Of those 100 leads, they reach 50. Of those 50, they close 25. Right? I like to have a little buffer where some people don't do it over the phone, but they will do it by email, and you have to just have a checkpoint where you can measure that. But that can add into that into that conversion rate, so it increases it. But then also I like to look at that metric of so the ones that you marked as sent to email to follow up, you monitor that, because then you can say if you didn't send an email, and let's work on your email objection handling, that your conversion rate would be 20% higher. So clearly the problem in your phone call now is email objections, and you're not closing well enough. So that's where you can start to get granular. But overall, you can have a look at 100 calls come in, 50 of them answer, 25% close. But if next month they close one of those, like you look at accounts reviewed, but you don't just call an account once. You can nurture people for months. That doesn't matter. Yeah. I wouldn't be looking at that or closing off leads after 30 days. Some people just aren't ready to buy. But you can look at accounts reviewed versus number of calls made.
So, that's interesting. Okay, I get that. So what you're saying is, when you measure conversion rate, you just measure conversion rate. There is no start or end date.
No. It's,
I love that.
it's for the month, and because then, and it resets on the next month, because it also encourages people to go back to and nurture the leads that they've had. So say they called them 2-3 months ago. Hey Bob, we spoke a couple months ago. You said you weren't quite ready at the time,
cool.
but that's a warm lead, and you're building the pipeline, and that's why there's always a ramp period for salespeople, because if you're just expecting them to only contact leads once, one, you're burning leads, wasting money. Two, you're repaying for new leads every single time. And three, you have like thousands of leads in the back end that you're doing nothing with. And four, you have no consistency building up over time. So the best salespeople, and that's why a lot of salespeople, when they're ingrained in a company after 3 years and they're the best, it's very hard for them to leave, because they have pipelines that they've been building up for years of deals that will finally close. And so no, absolutely, I don't track a lead on 30 days. I don't care when it closes. Ideally, close it straight away. But if it doesn't close, then circle back.
So, okay, so conversion rate based on, there's no start or end date to that. Like, you don't track conversion rate weekly or 30 days.
No,
or
just monthly, because then that's, you pay commission. Well, depending when. I prefer to pay commission monthly. I think 1st to the 30th, it's exciting. You can track it, you can measure it, you can see improvement. You can commend staff on their goals, and you can say, hey, like, when you started, you had 40%. Now you're at 70% conversion, which is amazing. And then you go into those granular metrics of, okay, we can have a look at where you're falling short, and now let's have a look at, you've got 70% of these not answered. What time? Now we can start looking at what time are we calling them? How many times have you sent them an email? What are we emailing them? How are we trying? And so you start with the basics, and then once you build that up and they have a pipeline, then you can start looking at more metrics. But you can't go all metrics all the time. It's like those the more granular metrics just help you get that extra 2, 3, 4, 5%. It's like when people do extra calf raises at the gym. Like if you just do calf raises at the gym, you're not going to get good legs. But if you go to the gym consistently every day, and then you start to taper and you think about how much water you drink, how much food you eat, how many carbs you eat, and get it really into that, that's when it starts to make that a little bit more impact. You get a little bit more lean, and then you can go get stage ready or comp ready. It's the same thing here. It's like you have to have the basic foundation first, and then you add in more metrics just to improve them. But it's improving and metrics based on excitement and based on developing your team, as opposed to we did this, but we're not good at that, so let's focus on the shit thing that we did this month, and then everyone gets demotivated because they micromanage. It's like, no, they're actually using these metrics to try to make us better, and that's, I think, the pivotal moment.
Yeah, well,
I can go on a rant on that.
Hey, I can too, right? I could sit and talk about like a couple of components in that for an hour, like, because I find it super interesting, because there's so many different tolerances and variables inside all of that as well. All right, so conversion rate's a good metric to track on just overall, and
obviously it just depends on what you're selling, right? Like if it's revenue, you track on revenue. If it's if number of deals,
I think revenue's a good metric, right? So there's so the sales and cash in. What's another performance metric that you should track pretty closely? Put it up on a board somewhere. Is it amount of appointments? Is it amount of calls?
Well, I think it's revenue or number of sales is a good one.
Quantity of sales.
It just depends on the product. Like
Units.
you can't really say. I won't put a blanket over it. I think it is subjective based on what you're selling and the quantity and the value. Because if you're like if it's Netflix and they're trying to sell an $8.99 subscription, and the salesperson recovers say $50 a day from Netflix, that's cumulatively not a big revenue amount. But you look at it over a 12-month period, it becomes a very large revenue contribution, and that's what you can share internally at the end of the year when you're doing your OKR presentation. You go, hey, the Netflix recovery team did X amount, and then that's like, wow, we can see why they're here. And they can sit there and be like, we're so proud to see the contribution that we made to the business, as opposed to like seeing a little number on the board. So it's subjective. Yeah,
super cool. So I want to ask you about lead distribution, right? So if I heard this come up a little bit in a discussion I had a couple of weeks ago, is they were talking about how do we distribute leads, right? Because they basically, like, there's a round robin, right? Everyone gets a lead. They go around. And I said, yeah, but that's okay, but what about the guys who are really performing at high levels? You need to give them better quality leads and probably a little bit higher percentage, right? And they go, oh yeah, okay, well how do we do that? I said, well you have to measure conversion rates and all that sort of stuff, right? So talk to me about your lead distribution strategy if you were to build a team and what that would look like and what do you consider?
I think that's a really funny question, in a good way, because like in past companies, like it is really very much like that. It's like it has to be fair, it has to be even, but it almost sales managers will give an inbound lead to someone who's struggling for that month for a quick win, which, yes, I understand it, but arguably, is it guaranteeing a return on investment for you? It's not. And is it rewarding the people that are actually working really hard for you?
It's a fine balance, right?
It's a very fine balance.
You want to help the guy who's not doing well, but you also want to make money. Yeah, that's why you have a sales team. No,
but also you don't want to, like, if we're going to talk about the emotional side, we don't want to say, oh, this guy is pushing so hard, and again, the metrics of remuneration would be based on certain segments and percentages, or again, subjective, right? But they're maybe one away from the next tier, and that could help them, and they've exceeded that target. So for me, I think the biggest thing isn't even revenue. It's look at percentage to target. If it's a newbie and their target's 5 and they've exceeded it in the first month by 10, so they're 200% to target, I'd reward that behavior. So
so that's improvement.
Yeah, so rewarding improvement, don't reward complacency. I think in my opinion, it could be controversial, I'm not sure, but I think if you have a team that works hard and you have individuals in that team who push, and day in, day out, they're constantly trying to get better, their metrics are consistent, or their performance is consistent. Like, it doesn't have to be hard. It's like, what's your percentage to target? That's a pretty key metric actually that we missed before, but it just kind of comes in there. Yeah. What's your percentage to target based on where you are within the business? Are you new? Are you tenured? That's the difference. And if you have X amount of percentage to target for the last month, you can redistribute the leads there. And I think that it can go on a round robin, but you have to qualify in order to get into that round robin.
I wonder how you could automate that, right, without having to, because that seems to me like there's a bit of work in reviewing and considering many different metrics, and then...
Not really, just percentage to target.
Yeah.
Just if they've exceeded target, it means that they're doing well, right? And if you wanted to add a secondary metric in there of close rate, but if they've exceeded their target, it's likely that their close rate's quite high, right? So if they've exceeded their target, they deserve to be rewarded, and so put everyone that's exceeded their target by X amount of percent or hit their target into a round robin, and that's just changed. That's 12 times a year. But at least it rewards people and it pushes people beyond their commission, or beyond their remuneration to actually do better, because we reward people that actually work and want to continue improving.
Yeah, I'm just hearing comp plans going off in my head, like just adjusting comp plans to certain levels of achievement, right? Let me just, I'm going to pivot a little bit and talk about leadership and the execution of strategies like that. I think people struggle with it. I struggle with it sometimes.
Yeah, I struggle with it too. Everyone struggles with it.
It's very hard. So how do you, for a business, right, building a sales team, how do you manage, monitor, and execute sort of that type of strategy? Because there's a lot in it. And what I mean by that is that a sales administrator? Is that a sales manager and a sales administrator? What is that?
I think we're talking about a lot of metrics, and it's sounding very complex and very scary.
Yeah.
But again, all those metrics are subjective based on what you're selling, and you pick the most important ones and you stick with them. And you pick them when you're writing the job description, so you should kind of know. And then if there's any major changes, obviously there'd be a lot of thought process in it. But you should know what those metrics are already before you hire the team, or if you are restructuring, you should know what it is before you roll it out. So it shouldn't be that complex. There shouldn't be 20, really. There should really only be 5, and they're paid on 1.
Yeah, cool.
I like that. If I had a whiteboard, I'd write it out. But
Rory, go get a whiteboard. Don't do that.
No, don't do that. We'll be here forever. No, but if you have it set up before you've hired the team, it can be as basic as a spreadsheet. Yes, it's a lot of things, but realistically, all of these key things are things that are what you should be tracking in your business. How many sales are you getting? How many leads are you getting? What's the conversion rate? What's the revenue? It's not actually out of the out of the blue. It shouldn't be hard. Like for me to put together a spreadsheet and a report takes 5 minutes. But it's the transparency with the team about what are they being tracked on. It should be in their job description, should be in their commission plan. There should be never any surprises. And there shouldn't be any changes without clear communication. And it just comes, it's just that, again, collaboration, communication.
So advice for anyone watching, so write it all down, write all your metrics, and then try and prioritize and figure out what are the key metrics I just need to focus on, and just execute against
It's like, what do you want? What do you want from them? Do you want them to call all day and not close anything?
Yeah.
Do you want them to focus on actual revenue and deal size?
Yeah.
Do you want them to focus on appointment setting? Do you want them to focus on warm leads only?
Yeah.
Like what do you want them to focus on first? Like what's the outcome that you want? Make sure that you consider how can they cheat the system? What's the potential like unethical impact on the customer, right? So it's like making sure that there's a way to monitor these things, because you do have to monitor those things, like credit card details. Are they making, if it's an email, making sure that you, if you pick a random sample size, that you can check that that's correct. And then more importantly, how can you keep the team motivated to do that? Like how do you motivate them to keep pushing? So different tiers based on overachievement. Obviously, you have to know how much it will cost the business to have this person on board, and where's that profitable balance for the business. But also explaining that to the individuals, like you have X salary, you have this commission, this is the contribution that you make, and I think that a salesperson should bring in 2 to 3 times minimum the amount that they cost to a business.
Shit, ours is 20. Maybe that's too high.
Right, I'm leaving. You don't need me here anymore. But
hey, dude, can you remind me? Let's put together a focus sheet so people can download it, and we'll give them a little bit of value. Because I agree with you. I sort of get all that, and I think there's so much noise in sales. I think everyone gets distracted, chasing unicorns all fucking day. Where, hey, guys, there's just 3 things that you should focus on. Just do that with consistency, and you'll be fine. Jinx. And you'll be fine. Like, man, these guys just get in their heads a little bit too much.
Yeah, it's like just talk to the person that you're speaking to, like a human, not like hi, I'm calling to sell. Oh my god, it's just like,
I'm great, thanks for asking.
It's like just you want to hang up on them. It's like
you do.
Just
hey, so you know when I said that the market's changed, people don't want to be sold to, man. It's more prevalent now than it ever has been. What they want is they want to get the information. They want to feel that they can trust you, right? And they want you to be transparent with them.
Yeah.
They don't need all the hooks and all the bullshit. They just want to get to the point. That's what I was saying sometimes about when the market's changed. I think that's more prevalent now than it's ever been, and since I've been involved in sales. And I'm like 154, so I've been involved in sales a long time.
Can you send me your plastic surgeon's detail?
Yeah, okay, cool. So I want to go back to the management of it though, because I think this is something that lots of small businesses, I'm coaching some young guys, they're building some sales teams, right? They're fucking it up big time, by the way. And I'm trying to help them.
In what way?
Well, I think they're not strategic enough, right? So there's 2 problems I have. I say you need to put a decent CRM in place, and you need to understand how to use it, because you're not doing that. You know, you're working off Excel spreadsheets, and that's fine, but you need to invest in the data integrity of the team. Give me your thoughts on that, how important that is.
I think data integrity is very important. If you don't have the money to invest in a CRM, make sure that you set up a spreadsheet well in a transparent way, that it has the correct things on it. I think obviously Salesforce is a great CRM. There's a lot of great CRMs, but I think that there's a place for spreadsheets as well. But it's the data that's the biggest part, because you can have the most expensive CRM, but if your staff don't use it properly, then there's no point in having it, because the data integrity is not there. Therefore, the results are skewed. And that's, I think it's just the focus on the data integrity and educating your team on why the data integrity is so important, and leaving notes, putting everything in there, creating opportunities, or putting it in the spreadsheet. That it's just educating the team on why it's important. And again, that comes down to, if we don't track this, we're not going to showcase how we're achieving our mission, which we're all working towards. And then how can we celebrate it if we don't have visibility over what we're doing? So always tying everything that you do has to come back to that overarching business objective. It's like, if we're putting data into a CRM, why are we doing it? Because otherwise people are like, oh, it's like I have to type this in, I have to put in the industry, I have to do all these things. Like, no, because then if you track, if we want to get into the granular thing, it's when we grow, when we can invest in someone that can actually analyze this data for us, and it doesn't have to be right now, but we're future planning the business to go that we sell best in this industry, so let's market more in this industry, or we're underperforming in this industry, for example, and we can do that based on the data that we have collected, because now we've hired someone to analyze it and pull reports on it, because we have the funding to do that, because you guys have performed so well, but we're underperforming this industry, so let's have a look, how are we talking to them, how is our product applicable to that industry, how are we currently positioning it, are we doing it in the same way, construction versus beauty, for example, you wouldn't sell the product in the same way, right? And so then you show them why the data is important, and then that's where they're like, okay.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it, that they, when you talk about data to a sales team, they get all glassy-eyed, right? But yeah, that you're right. You've got to explain to them why it's important to them.
Yeah, they get glassy-eyed if they don't understand, and it's when you talk at people and not to people.
Yeah.
Have you read The Motive?
I haven't, no.
Highly recommend. Alex Hormozy also recommends it. But it's a really, really good...
you didn't get the job. You can stop talking about
it. No, I know, but honestly, I just...
I think Layla should have hired you.
Okay.
But, so she's listening.
Can we tag her in
We'll tag her on it. Yeah.
Tag her, Layla should have hired me. Great book. On that note, my mum said to me, you don't want to work for... The issue you're having now is you just don't want to work for somebody else. I said, you're right, that won't change if I
think you would struggle working for someone else as a side note.
Yeah, but that was
you have too much going on that head of yours.
But going back to The Motive, it was it's a kind of like a narrative or a dialogue between two CEOs, one of which engaged a consulting company that helped that previously helped a competitor or the same industry leader grow their business. And so that CEO that succeeded contacted this other one and said, hey, I'd love to help you so that you don't even have to engage the company. They let me know. And it was this really interesting dialogue. And the overarching message was, why do you want to be the CEO? And it's, what change do you want to impact? And what are you doing for your team to help them constantly drive that change? And it can't be selfish. And
you just gave me an idea. Impact statement. That's an old thing. An impact statement.
Yeah, impact, vision, mission, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I think it's just like, it's overcomplicated again. Just why? Why are you doing it? Like with Mirabelle, I'm very particular with my marketing and the content, and the reason for that is I understand that polished videos work. I understand that influencers work. I get all of that, but we've had a success growth. Again, I've only just started working full time in that business 2 weeks ago. I've been working full time.
Congratulations, that's cool.
Thank you. But I've grown it. I was nominated for the Business News Australia Young Entrepreneur Awards because my customers nominated me alongside businesses that have been growing or working full time for years. And I did that because I went against the norm, and my message is very clear. It's real women, real customers. We're an Australian business, and we want women to feel confident and comfortable in a realistic standard to do their own nails and grow healthy nails. And I don't need to advertise that it lasts for 5 weeks or that our warehouse is chaos or whatever, because that's irrelevant. The product is the same. And our messaging is very clear to that target demographic. And with that, we build a real community that has a buy-in to me and my brand. And it's different to every other one. So it's that clear communication of the why I'm doing it, and the why is that I don't want to sell them something that they can't do themselves, or they expect it to be photoshopped or perfect or amazing the first time. It's like saying, go to a makeup shop, buy all the makeup on the stand, and you're going to apply it like a makeup artist. Or you can buy an out-of-the-box hair dye, or you can buy all the parts you need to build a car. You're going to know how to do it straight away. Probably not, but...
Yeah, it's resonating with me, with you. It's because you're very focused on that. Like you spoke about that as we started this conversation. You've gone back to it again, and I think most people miss it when they build a sales team. Well, I do, because it's not my strength. I think there's two types of sales leadership, right? There's people who hit pretty hard and drive, and then there's people who are more strategic and using intellect and analysis, right? I think if you can find those two people, you in the same person, you could probably do pretty well. I do want to talk about Mirabelle and your business and the e-com stuff, but before we do that, I just want to finish off on the sales thing, because I think people are really struggling with it right now.
We can come back for that another time, for Mirabelle another time.
I want to go back to leadership, right, in sales, and what that looks like strategically. And in terms of humans, right, because I struggle with sometimes doing all of that stuff, which I think is amazing. I think that's how you take a team from 20 to 50 salespeople. At what point do you start to tear out people in a team that's driving a sales team, right? Because I think I asked you just before, like finding a sales manager to be two different types of people, I find really hard, because I don't think they are. I think it's actually two people. I think there's like a business analyst or a sales analyst, and then there's a sales manager who's the other personality type who's doing motivation and coaching. And then there's the other person feeding the data back to the sales manager. What are your thoughts on that? How does that look for you?
Again, I think it's subjective on the size of the business and the scope, and sometimes if you bring in external support just to kickstart it and get them to come and keep you accountable and check in and work on that could work well, because you don't necessarily need to, if you have clear visibility of all the metrics, you don't need someone, I don't think personally, full-time in there to do it for you. But if you just have someone that can give you a report, or if you educate your leaders on how to look at the metrics as well and to motivate, because if you have two separate people, and again, when a business gets to a certain level, absolutely, you will need more staffing. But even looking at smaller businesses, because most SMB, like up to 50, 100 staff, like you don't need to be leadership heavy. I think it's just having a leader that understands that the customer is happy to get on the phones with you. They don't have to, but they will, to showcase that something will work. Like leading by example, I think is really, really important. And just explaining the reasoning behind the metrics, and that comes from them actually understanding why they are, and then coaching to them. So if you have the two different people and one person is coaching and one person is giving metrics, there's almost likely, if there's no communication there's going to be no synergy, because they're almost going to be disjointed in how are these metrics relevant to the coaching. And coaching is, again, also subjective, because you can keep coaching. Like I still love to be coached in sales, because there's always a new way you can say something to a certain personality type, and you understand nuances over the phone or body language, or you can see someone's getting bored, and when can you ask a controversial question, or how do you extract certain information, and all of that, it comes with time, and the person that's coaching has to understand the impact of the metrics. So it depends on the size of the business, I think.
Yeah. What if it was a startup? Two salespeople. It's done by one person, right?
Yeah.
Just trying to think of what. They asked me this question, and I couldn't give them an answer. I said, well, because I was like you. I said, well, we want to build the sales team to 10 people. At that time, do we need to start getting layers of leadership management? I said, well, I don't know. It depends. So it's a bit of a tough one. So we might just push that to the side.
I think even in a startup, though, if it's a startup and it's small people and the founders are still so involved, that's a really exciting time. I think no one can sell a business better than a founder. So if anything, they just need someone to help them articulate their vision and their mission and excite their sales team, because their sales team needs to be able to sell what they're doing better than them. If you have a sales team that can articulate what you're doing better than you are and why you're doing it better than you are, that's the perfect sales team for you. But that only comes from the business leader being able to articulate it. And if you bring in a sales manager to deal with it, you still have to educate them on that, because otherwise they might take the business in a completely different direction. And there has to always be that consistent alignment between the leader of the business and any other leader and any other team. So if it's a startup and they're trying to scale, I think that they need to have the direct involvement straight away.
Coaching, right? Does it work? And what I mean by that is, some managers are really big on coaching individually. So my first question is, and there's a part B to it, but the first one is coaching worth it, and does it have good quality impact on the 3 key metrics or the 2 key metrics? And how long do you do it for before you give up and say, hey mate, this is not the right, sales is not for you?
Yeah. I think coaching is definitely worth it, and it doesn't necessarily always have to come from you. Like, I think it's also really important to bring in external sources and external perspectives, because to have everyone fit into one mold of selling is very challenging as well.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
I said, if your coach doesn't resonate with half of the team, the coaching won't work.
Well, but if they don't resonate with half the team, then they're not a good salesperson, because an excellent salesperson can start to.
Good point.
You need to. I think as a sales coach, you need to just be able to teach the nuances of conversation, the understanding of product, like product understanding and how it fits in. So, what's the product? What are the applications to the person that you're speaking to? What's the information that you need to get out of that person in order to get them to realize that the product is for them? And what questions are you going to ask? How you ask those questions, what tonality you ask those questions in, the pace, the time, how long it takes you, whether you talk about your dog, your kids, if you get straight to the point, you're very direct, you're very bubbly, whatever it is, that can't be coached. Because if you start to make robotic people, then they're going to be stuck to this script, and they're like, oh my God, I don't understand. Like, I don't know, this isn't in my script. I don't know how to say it. And then they can't build their relationship, right?
That's so interesting.
So
I think I've been guilty of that, right? I build a script. I know it works.
But it works for you.
Well, hang on. You're right. But also I built a, we went from $0 to $1 million in 12 months with 2 or 3 people on that script. Now, sometimes I think, well, they were probably just the right 2 or 3 people. And then when you start to build a team out, like we have much more than that now, it doesn't resonate with everybody. So I got to the point where, okay, we have to give them freedom. Right? Freedom of speech. Hey, freedom of speech. Go and use your personality. So I said, you don't need to follow the script, but you need to follow the framework. Yeah. Do you know what I mean when I say that?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, you follow the framework. You have to, if they understand the product, and that's where I think a lot of sales teams fumble, is that they don't actually understand why they're asking questions. Because when you follow a script and it gives you A, B, C, D, they're like, okay, and then they don't even think about why they're asking it. And so if you fundamentally just take that script out of it and you give them a script, I love scripts, right? But that's just to help.
Have you always used a script?
I always write a script because I want to understand how I might start something, and then it allows me to kind of play with it and toy around with it. I never use a script now, because now I literally just want to understand what are the key things that my product does, or key outcomes that they're going to achieve. What are the goals or the challenges, goals and challenges of that person? So what goals do they have? Whether it's revenue, whether it's self-development, self-growth, again, B2B, B2C, it's different. What's actually hindering them from achieving that? But as relevant to the product that I'm selling. And then, but for my product existing, if they found something that had A, B, C, D, and E, would that help them achieve their goals and overcome those challenges? And what would that be worth to them, right? And then when you find out those things, then you can kind of say, well, my product does this and this and this and this. It costs this much, and you get X amount of ROI, right? But you need to, your team needs to know what the product is doing and what it's solving and what questions to ask for the person that they're selling to actually elaborate on those things. Yeah, because if you're right, no one wants to be sold to these days. So just
how does this benefit me? What is it going to give me?
Have the conversation.
It's hard to sell educational products are actually pretty difficult to sell, because they're not a tangible product. You can't say, hey, it doesn't fit me, I'll send it back and give my money back, or exchange, or whatever. You're not buying a Ferrari, or you're not getting that solid asset. It's just that instant dopamine. It's like, we're selling you something, and you're going to have to put all this work into it, right? And so it can be difficult.
But why would they put the work into it?
Yeah, to get a result.
What's the result?
Well, I actually think it's prosperity. I think people are walking towards prosperity, but they're all at varying degrees. Some of them are like top, middle, bottom of the funnel. And what I mean by that, some of them are really committed and are focused on their goals, and some of them are just starting that journey. So it's hard to find a sales team that understand how to communicate that. It's difficult, because that's sort of quite psychological. right? Understanding people's personality types, how to use tonality is very difficult for some people. Most of my sales guys speak the same way all the time to the different people. You know, that 33-year-old Asian woman who just immigrated here with 3 kids, single mum, to the 45-year-old project manager. You know what I mean? It's like, we tend to communicate the same way to them. So it's very difficult to find a team that can be dynamic.
Well, it just comes down to that they need to know why they're saying certain things, like asking questions with purpose, and also recognizing language barrier and seeing when a person doesn't understand them, and not being afraid to re-ask the same question different ways until you get an answer, because you're just trying to get the information to see if it's a good product fit. And I think another thing is that a good sales team knows when not to sell and when just to let it go, because that can be quite empowering for them to not have to grasp onto every single lead.
That's a good point, isn't it? When not to sell. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think they're always trying to sell. I'm still stuck on this leadership thing on how to execute against that, but
well, I think when a leader believes in it and they can communicate it with their team, and they're just consistent in communicating with that team, then that's where it comes from. Like, it's just, team meetings are only boring and a waste of time when the value isn't appreciated or believed in. So if you can find a way to structure it to give updates that are enlightening, that actually drive the team, that motivate the team, that inspire the team, that remind them of the why and the values and the care that the business has in them, and that the care the business has in the customers, then but it has to come from leadership down.
Yeah. I'm going to pivot to go practical now. So talk to me about, you know, how do you move around a sales team when you're building the sales team and managing it? It's like, do you have a morning huddle every morning? Do you sit next to them? Like, do you let them make some mistakes? Like, what does that look like for you?
Again, I think that's just really different. I've always, I think just checking in every morning, see how you're going.
Yeah.
But nothing too formal, and just a once a week kind of look at all the pipeline, what's coming up, look at the metrics if that's relevant, and just really make it an open floor of what do you need help with, what support do you need this week, what are your key things that you're working on, what do you think is going to close, and just having that transparency. It's almost like a personal trainer, because you keep your team accountable, and it makes them almost autonomous in a way to do their own work, because when you grow a sales team, if you're babysitting them all the time, it's not going to grow because there's only one of you, right? But if you empower them to be autonomous, but then you have those checkpoints every week, or then every fortnight or every month, preferably I think weekly or fortnightly is enough, and it just keeps them accountable and they understand. And then you celebrate the small, more relevant wins that are relevant to the whole team in a weekly team huddle, and then you have your quarterly check-ins and then your annual OKR check-in as well, to really like show the mass of the number and the contribution. And then just a one-on-one is always important as something separate to metrics, but to actually understand how your staff are feeling within their role, what development they want, where they're struggling, like just an open forum. Again, just transparency and communication is always really key. So
you're saying set up a little meeting with your agents, one based for metrics, just metrics, and then the next one should be about what are you looking to achieve, how do you think you're going, those two.
Metrics and strategy, like that's just like a weekly, fortnightly, depending how many you have, and also depending on how quickly deals progress. Because sometimes it can change quite regularly, sometimes it can't, obviously. And then you have your one-on-ones once a month, which is just about them. It's not about metrics, it's more, that's the emotional side, like how are you feeling, what can we do, where else can we support, where do you feel like you're struggling, some coaching, some tips. In terms of even scripting or coaching or call listening, it depends. And like you can listen and you can point it out and be like, I don't know if this would have changed the outcome, because you're not there. You can't predict if they would have said something different, but you can say you could try something like this next time, because you can notice their body language was this, or they asked this question, or do you feel like you were confident enough in this? What information were you missing? And then you kind of prompt them to come to their own conclusions almost.
Here's a question for you that was thrown out in the advisory group. How long do you leave it? Before you have to go, In fact, I think out of the whole group, everyone asked that question.
I think the probationary period is more than sufficient. If
3 months?
3 to 6
months.
3 to 6
3 to 6
3 to 6 months. I think within 3 months you should know if the team member aligns with the values of the brand, if their work ethic aligns with the values of the brand, and if what they're wanting to, if they understand the goals, the product, the business, and then at that point, it should never be at the 6-month point where they don't know that it's coming, because you should be having those weekly check-ins.
That's a good point. They should know it's coming.
Yeah, they should understand where their performance sits. It should never be a surprise, but that comes from the interview, right? Like, it's before you even hire them. You set the expectations, because it's all about culture and support, absolutely, but it's also the expectations that I think a lot of people forget is, this is a business. This is what we're trying to achieve. This is your contribution to it. These are the metrics. This is the support we're going to give you. We have the expectation that you're very transparent about where you feel like you're struggling, where you're succeeding. We'll always be the same back. Let's always have that communication. It's a difficult conversation with people struggle to have, but without these conversations, we can't progress forward. But especially in startups, it's so important, because one, you don't want to be churning staff. Two, you want the staff to feel comfortable and to trust you and to be a part of the team. And three, you just can't afford to keep losing and retraining people. So you have to be upfront with, this is what we want to achieve, this is how we're going to achieve it. But also, if you feel like there's a better way, bring it forward. Because then if it comes to that point at 6 months and you ask them, have we provided you support? Have you had all the resources? What do you feel like was lacking? When did you bring that to us? There shouldn't be that conversation, because you just know that there's not an alignment there.
Sales, man, like, it's just, I'm getting so many people are saying, hey, can you do some sales coaching? Can you do some sales coaching? Like, it is the most...
Yeah.
Oh, it's on everyone's mind at the moment. It's crazy.
It's a really big topic, because people really struggle with
it. I struggle with it still.
But they overcomplicate it. Like, that's why I listen to Hormozy, like, because he doesn't overcomplicate it. It's, you talk to the person, you understand when to push, you understand when not to push, you understand your product, you believe in your product, and you know the questions to ask, the information to get, and how to position it to get the person at the end of the line to recognize that the product is a good fit. That's it. And then in order to get that at scale, you have to have a team that is invested in your business, it's invested in you as a leader, invested in the director of the company, invested in the product, understands their contribution to the business and wants to see it succeed, and that they have the full transparency of the business in terms of metrics, communication, and KPIs in order to achieve that. It's really not that hard. To execute.
Yeah, you say it like that. Hey, it's easy.
To execute it is a little bit hard.
I think the execution is very difficult. I just want to go back to the character thing again, and then we can get to the end of this. So talk to me about character in the interview. Like, really sort of hone in on that a little bit for me.
I always ask people what they've done to get to there, and they always say, "Oh, I studied this, I worked here," and I say no. And I always try to disarm them by saying, "Look, this is a really candid interview. We want to
be candid in the interview.
Be candid. It's like, I just want to understand you as a person. Like, we'll just sit there. Like, we want to just know who you are, because you spend most of your time here. It's 7 to 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. It's a lot of time. And you kind of give the prefix of the business. Like, this is what we want to achieve. We're very big on culture. Obviously, everyone has to work together in order to achieve certain things, and that's what we believe and we prioritize. So we want to understand the people that we're looking to hire, because we want them to be here long term. And initially, if someone wants to be there long term, that's a great sign, because then they're committed to the company. And if that doesn't resonate with them, then you already kind of don't really want them there, because they're just planning to...
So you're trying to eliminate the person who's really just looking for a job.
Yeah. Exactly. You don't want, again, depends on the company, but as a startup, if you're investing in a salary and it's a big portion of your business, which seems to be the questions that you're being asked from startups, you want someone that's ready to grow with you and to take sacrifices and to buy in and to really put their soul into that company alongside you and believe in what they're selling. And so that comes from asking the person, like, what brings you here? Like, what's your history? What are you passionate about? What do you do outside of this? Like, what are your goals for yourself? What's important to you? What are your values? you spend more time with this person probably than your partner.
Mm.
You need to know these things, right?
Mm.
Because you don't have to be best friends,
Mm.
but you need to know that their values align with that of the brand.
Mm.
And
it's good advice. I think people miss that in interviews. They go through the bullshitty questions about talk to me about this job.
Yeah.
What's your salary expectation? And
well, you asked it at the end. Actually, a question for you: salary expectation.
Yeah.
I love that. Do you publish it usually?
Yeah. All the time. I talk about money in the first instance straight away.
Why?
And I do that because, some people say, "Oh, you just want to be transparent and honest." I say, "Yeah, I do, but I know that this is an economic plan, right? I probably have a family to support, bills to pay, a mortgage to pay, all that sort of thing. So, their key baseline of earnings, I think, is really important to talk about, because I don't want them to take a job that, they're not making enough money to manage the economics, and they have to go somewhere else and I lose them. So I just like to talk about that up front, and I get a gauge for their self-worth on it a little bit as well. You know what I mean? I sort of, and the other reason I do it is because I think lots of people don't. And I want to put everything out there straight away, and then if they make a decision on the hard stuff, then I know we can come to terms.
Yeah.
That's why I do it. Do you do it?
No,
do you have a
it's
different
really
strategy?
interesting. Like I can absolutely see why you do it at the beginning, because it almost just takes that out of the equation. I will do if I like the candidate.
Yeah.
Or if I think that they're a suitable candidate and will progress to the next stage of interviewing, I'll always ask it at the end.
Mm.
But I think that it's in sales. It depends on the role as well.
Yeah.
But I gauge it at the end, and I don't usually publish the salary because I like to understand what people think that they're worth, and actually sometimes paying based on that. Because if you are trying to say you want like a SDR that cold calls and performs, and they have a guaranteed track record of that, and they come to the interview, they're very well spoken, and you've analysed all the questions, and you're advertising at 50K, but they're being paid 90, but you kind of will have that probationary period. I almost feel that by saying that you're not negotiable in the 50K in the first instance almost could potentially get rid of a good candidate because you're not willing to invest in them.
In sales, I tell them this is what you can earn.
Yep.
Like our data tells us that in 12 months you can earn this, but there's some work to do, and that's on you.
Yep.
We'll help you pay your bills, pay your fuel, get your bottle of rosé on the weekend. But outside of that, if you want to earn big money and you can here, that's going to be on your shoulders. I sort of pitch it like that a little bit. In interviews, I actually whiteboard everything for them.
Yeah.
That's what I do. I'm a whiteboarder. So I can say, this is what you can earn, this is the sort of calls you got to make, and by the way, here's our data, and I give them the data, and then I send them a video of the sales team in action, so they know what they're coming into. And if they get, and that's what I do in the interview. But I want them to know that you can earn $250 a year. We're going to pay you a really minimal base salary, but that's just what it is. There's no negotiation. We'll coach you, we'll train you. We're doing something that matters. That's something that counts. I think we have some contribution, and here's our massive transformative purpose. Now, if you're cool with that, let's sit down and have a chat for 30 minutes.
Yep.
That's what. And I'll get them to pitch in the interview.
Nice. Yeah, I love doing that.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Yeah, I always love doing a pitch in the interview. But sometimes, depending, if they're really, really raw, I'll actually coach in the, interview after the pitch, and then get them to do it again. Yeah. And then you can gauge their willingness to learn, which I found has been really, really successful in the past.
Yeah, I think pitching in the, what they say, I'm always the best salesperson. And then you get them to pitch their product and they're terrible. So they're sort of lying. People lie in interviews. I'm a bit of a skeptic sometimes on people.
It's very skeptical. Sometimes they put on the spot, they don't know the product.
Yeah, I get them to pitch their product. That's what I do. I never get them to pitch ours. Yeah. Because they shouldn't have the IP of that product, right? Anyway.
That's brutal.
It is brutal. It's pretty brutal. Some people really love it, and some people hate it. Yeah. Some people hate it. Like, I just had an interview before on the phone with a guy, and I cut the interview off in 5 minutes because he was just all over the place on the call. Couldn't answer the question directly. I asked him, you've been moving around a lot. Can I ask you why? And I just felt like he was lying to me, so I terminated the call.
Did you just hang up on him?
No, I didn't hang up. No, I didn't hang up on him. I say, hey, look, for us, you're probably not the right fit.
Yeah.
You've been bouncing around a lot. Really do appreciate your time. Thank you for applying. I'll have Taylor reach out to you. That's it. It's done. Otherwise, you sit there for 30 minutes and go through a whole call for it's such a waste of time.
No, 100%. That's something I've learned with age. It's like you can do that. Anyway.
Couple of takeaways before we land this is that you know sales super well. You know that, right? Like super well. You see it through such a different lens than most people. Because most people I talk to who run big sales teams, by the way, these guys are churning millions and millions of dollars. Don't see it the way that you see it, don't have the analytical application to it, that lens, right? So that's super interesting about you. And I remember when I met you 2 years ago, I think I said to Don, I said, man, that girl's got so much drive and she sees sales in such a different way. It was original.
Thank you.
Which is, I don't know where you get that from. I think you must be a bit of a learner and a studier and an absorber of information.
Honestly, I just feel like there's always more to learn. Like, I really appreciate the compliment, but for me, there's always more to understand about people, and that's, I think, the fundamental of it is the curiosity and the wanting to understand. Yeah. And
maybe it's human psychology for you. Maybe that's where that leverage point is, that you understand how people think.
I just like to see the benefit come to life. Like, when I get really excited when I can see the end point for somebody, and that I know that everyone's going to be mutually successful in the best way possible, and that's really exciting for me. And understanding how to ask the right questions and constantly learning how else to ask, what more to do, what barriers there might be, what psychological barriers there might be, and doing that by reading books, listening. Like, there's always so much more to learn. So that's...
Well, I'm sure you've read all of Alex's books.
Oh. No, who?
Like, who hasn't? Well, just because sales is so fucking interesting for me right now, because I'm actually in it. We're navigating, we're moving the... Can I talk about this now? Yeah, I can talk about it. So I think I'm going to notify everyone on Monday. This won't be out till Friday. We're moving the sales manager into a commercial role, and I'm going to step back into the team just to get my finger back on the pulse, see how our customers feeling, see how the guys are operating, because we've got lots of guys remote now, which is another challenge. So I'm super focused on it, and it's the biggest, most common question I get in a DM. Fucking sales. So it's crazy. So you've got that lens on sales, right, which I find super fascinating. Because I don't speak to too many sales professionals who have that, and as I was just saying before, I think you have this ability to understand human nature and psychology, which is super cool. God, I wish sales managers should do it. Psychology course.
Only in sales, really. Like, outside of that, I'm like...
Outside of that, I'm shit. But inside sales, I'm amazing. So the last thing was, well, there's two more things. The third thing is that you could never work for somebody else. You probably should never do that. So you said that before. I'm glad you made that decision. I think when I met you, I said to you, man, if you want a job, I'd hire you. Right? And you go, dude, I'm not looking for a job. I'm absorbing information. Because you're a bit of a networker, I think.
Absolutely. I think that there's always something to learn from people, and as long as you don't expect anything in return, and just have those conversations. Like, I've met some incredible people, and each of them just have such an incredible contribution to my life and to perspective, and I think that will never go out of fashion, because every single, I think every culture, everyone is so different, everyone's so unique, and there's always a new way to look at something. And I said this a while ago, but the way that you build something is you look at past architectural plans, past resources, past cities, past governments, and see what worked, see what didn't, and then you build something new. It's how you write a research essay, it's how you do anything. So by absorbing more information, meeting new people, respecting people's opinions, and then having, I think, a good conversation, a good debate even sometimes about topics, is just really, really fascinating to continue evolving and grow.
Last thing, Layla should have hired you. She's I wonder who got the job, if anyone got the job. because you should be in Las Vegas right now. But then again, you'll be working with somebody else. You probably don't want to do that.
I went home. I saw it. I saw it on her story. I went home. I got the book $100 Million Leads. Yeah. I created a full pitch deck. So I didn't send my CV. I created like a pitch deck CV, and then I did a 15-minute pitch on my CV, and then I emailed everyone,
in their company.
Yeah, not everyone, but I emailed Layla, Alex, the hiring manager, the head of people, the head of business development. I emailed them all. Got a response the next morning. They did.
From the police? Or
yeah, they're like, please go. No, I did get a response the next morning. They're having a look at my application, and that it was just we weren't quite working rights in Australia, US, all that, and then it wasn't quite there, not enough experience, and that's completely fine. I feel like just to even get a response for me was good, just to be able to do that, get out of my comfort zone, and just pull something like that together, and to get their attention for 5 minutes was sufficient for me. But kind of glad I didn't move to Vegas, because I wouldn't be here having this chat with you.
Hey, which is totally worth it, by the way. Hey, very nice to see you again. Great to chat to you. What I'd like to do is a part 2. And go deep on marketing. Oh man, advertising, marketing.
Should we schedule 3 hours?
Jeez, I wish I could. Someone get a bottle of wine now. But let's break that into another chat, maybe in a few months. Thank you for coming in. Really good to see you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Business Beats podcast today. Look, we hope you enjoyed the episode as much as we enjoyed putting it together for you. Every story we share and every conversation we have, it's all part of a bigger picture. Connecting with you, our listener, and pushing out value. That's what we're here for. If you like what you heard today and want to be part of our growing community, don't forget to subscribe. Subscribing not only gives you automatic updates for new episodes, but also access to other cool stuff. Soon to be released books, courses, and more. Your engagement truly makes a difference, and we sincerely appreciate it.